Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. I'm John Murphy, writer and producer on a TV show called Innovation Nation, which airs Saturday mornings on CBS. Check your local listings. And now I travel across the country, talking to everyday people over comfort food in diners about their lives, their community, their secrets, and how they feel about America, the good, the bad, and, of course, the ugly. Now, the whole point of this podcast is to reveal who we are as a nation. That's pretty much it. I only ask first names so guests have anonymity and can speak as open and honestly as possible. I'm not here to judge, condemn, or cancel. Just listen to their story and learn why they live, love, think, vote, and emote a certain way. Basically, what makes them tick. And by doing so, you and I can hear their humanity and maybe learn something outside of our own life experience, becoming more tolerant and understanding, even if we totally disagree. See, I found after many years of talking to people, 95% of the time I find something I like about them, and the conversation ends with at least a degree of respect. Now, so this is a new podcast, so if you like it, feel free to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/Dinerverse. Join for as little as $1 or $2 a month for access to some bonus content like outtakes, photos of the diners and guests I interview, random thoughts from me, and coming very soon, 3 questions, where the tables are turned and people get to ask me 3 questions about anything, which may turn out to be the worst idea in the history of podcasting, but, we'll see. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. So for this episode, I went to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Okay, that's not really true. I tried to call several diners in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., but nobody called me back. God's honest truth, nobody called me back. So I had no choice but to cross the Potomac River a few miles south to Alexandria, Virginia. And I came across the Beeliner Diner. That's one word, Beeliner Diner on King Street. Now, this isn't the Old Town Colonial King Street. This is the King Street a few miles northwest near Alexandria High School. The owner's name is Noelie. Very unique. I've never heard that name before. It's kind of like Noel with a Lee on the end of it, Noelie. She was totally open to letting me schlep all of my crap into a booth and talk to whoever I wanted to, so I started with her. First of all, Noelie, thank you very much for letting me come into the Beeliner Diner here and do the podcast.
Glad to have you. Thank you.
This is really cool. I mean, it's has like a retro feel, but it's modern. It's got neon in it. And this counter, how long is this counter? It looks huge.
You know, it is huge, and it was like a huge design feature for us to do this. So the counter itself is 40 seats, and from end to end, it's about 32 feet.
Wow.
And about 18 feet wide.
It doesn't look like a typical diner, but it has a diner feel, but it looks super modern. I mean, how long have you been open?
Well, actually, just about a little over 7 months. When we did this, it was sort of taking over an existing space and creating something new out of it. And
what was here before?
There was a restaurant here for almost 40 years called Atlantis Family Restaurant and Pizzeria. And
Was it a Greek place?
It was Greek. It was Greek owned. And he and his wife literally worked here 7 days a week. It was very much a community place. People were raising their families and bringing generations of people to the restaurant. So it was a big deal when they closed down. So that was certainly a big consideration for us when we started this project.
So you took over their space after 40 years.
Yes.
What was your concept? Why call it Beeliner? What's with the bee motif? And by the way, let me describe this. So it's a cavernous type of diner. It's not really small and intimate. It's really big. That huge counter we talked about. Neon honeycomb lights up in the ceiling. And then you have these really unique beehive glass bulbs over the counters. What kind of lighting is that?
Yeah, well, that was actually lighting of necessity. We were trying to do all of this during the kind of the darkest times of COVID and the pandemic and the supply chain issues. And I was having trouble getting stuff that I needed. I was sort of desperately searching around for anything I could find that was bee related or hexagons or whatever. And I stumbled across these light bulbs. Somebody had a pallet of them basically for $20 each, and I bought them all. I got $20 pendant lights instead of $300 pendants, and economically it made sense, and they're perfect for the space.
You said bar. You serve alcohol here?
We do, yeah. We have a full beer, wine, and liquor.
The new modern diner is here, people.
Yeah, right?
Come on in.
Yeah, that was a big part of the concept from day one, adding that
So
space.
you could get an egg scramble and a shot of Jack if you wanted.
Absolutely. Yep. In fact, this morning, about an hour ago, I had a customer come in and order a breakfast platter. And then when I asked him if he needed anything else, he said, yeah, just a shot of Grey Goose. You got it, man.
That's a good business model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, tell me about these paintings that are on the wall. They have very large format paintings that are very kind of modernistic and abstract. And who did those?
Well, those were actually done by one of my partners, Marco Panis. He was a professional artist for many years. When we were trying to figure out what to do with this giant white wall, I said to him, I was like, I need your paintings. I think they have to go on this wall. And so he brought them over, did a museum quality hanging, and there they are in the space, and they're perfect.
Is his work hanging in galleries, or was it in art galleries?
It was in galleries, yeah. He did a lot of showings.
From where? New York? Where?
New York, and also in San Francisco. He sold a lot of art and did it professionally, relatively successfully for a long time.
Well, what's really interesting in traditional diners, people think of, okay, they're going to have posters of like old movies or old TV shows or old black and white photos, or they have a wall of autographs of celebrities. And this is like museum quality art hanging in a diner that serves eggs and a full bar. You can get a margarita. What a concept. How's the community responding to this place?
Well, it's funny because we get all kinds of people coming through the door for the first time, and it varies, but it's usually a little bit of shock, like, wow, this isn't what I expected. Certainly people are right off the bat. I hear lots of things about how cheerful the space is, how bright and open it feels, that it just kind of feels nice to walk in. I hear all the time about how it has great vibes, whatever that means to individuals, but I kind of tend to agree. So
why call it Beeliner?
Well, that's actually a name that belonged to another place in Seattle that was there for many years.
Is that where you're from?
That is where I'm from, yeah. And it's a place that was kind of near and dear to my heart, and for a lot of reasons, but primarily the biggest reason really was because going in there, I always felt like I was accepted and not judged as a human being, and I was in.
Why would you feel that way?
Well, I grew up in the 60s and we were hippies. My mother was like we lived in communes and. You
did?
Yeah, and hitchhiked everywhere. And my brother had longer hair than I did. And everybody was like, oh, what a cute little girl, stuff like that.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a pause before I get to the Beeliner story.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in a commune in a hippie community?
Well, let me just say indoor plumbing is important. It was an interesting existence, really, because for the time it was also kind of radical, but it was, as I recall it, I was quite young, of course, and a lot of it a lot of my kind of memories about it were the shared spaces and all of the different people and their different ways of looking, their different ways of being, their different ways of talking, and how you kind of all were together despite all of these differences.
Do the experiment of humanity in a community where everything is shared, do you feel that worked? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I'll tell you, for me, it was a good thing because it did. I'm extremely tolerant of all kinds of people. I am very unlikely to judge somebody at first glance. I tend to believe that everybody has got certain unique characteristics and everybody's sort of worth investigating, finding out more about. And I think that directly comes from those experiences with so many different kinds of people and living in these environments that were not normal, having to constantly process being different.
But because humans are different and individuals and they have kind of their own beat, if you will, did everybody get along? Was it really, really loving, or was it like kind of dangerous?
It depended on who happened to be there at the time. Some people weren't all normal or together enough to be in a situation like that in a safe manner. The 60s and the early 70s were a pretty turbulent time. A lot of people were engaging in all sorts of activities that were not so unique. Now we're kind of immune to the ideas of people being drug addicts, and we don't think about it too much. It's just part of the fabric of society. But then it was a little bit more radical. So you had people that were at all kind of levels of their own sort of personal development, whether they were hardcore drug addicts that were just what they were, or maybe they were people that were experimenting with hallucinogenics or things that as a kind of a spiritual journey. And there was all these levels to what people were doing. Yeah, that sometimes it didn't feel very safe. Other times I experienced situations that were really loving and people that just cared because we were human beings. And that was also maybe a little bit unique for, as a part
absolutely.
of that time. Yeah. So that was, I guess I tend to be a glass half full kind of person. So I tend to take those sorts of lessons over the negative sides of it.
At what age were you living in this commune community? Between the ages of what?
We started there probably around, I was maybe 3 or 4.
Was there lots of nudity in your commune?
Yeah. I always think about that. I'm like, well, yeah, there was. People would just sort of wander around.
So maybe things a young, impressionable girl shouldn't be seeing at that age.
Yeah, I mean, and it seemed very sort of natural. Like it didn't feel sexual, let's say.
Well, that's good.
I think that was part of kind of the dynamic. It wasn't always. It wasn't, but it was like if it happened, then it was not a big deal. If you saw somebody leaving the bathroom or wandering, looking for a towel, it wasn't. It wasn't like people were making a big deal out of it.
So you're the kind of person, if somebody walked into the Beeliner Diner completely naked, you'd say, sure, have a seat.
Yeah, I probably would. I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to get you a towel mainly for the comfort of the other diners. I don't care what you do, Yeah, I really don't. So.
Don't try that. And people listening, do not try that. I'm sure the local authorities would be here in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So back to the Beeliner name.
Yeah.
What do people come here for? What are you known for?
We're known for a number of things, but many people in the area know our bakery, bread and water company. A lot of our customers are coming with this expectation of things that are a little outside the box, classics that are done to sort of a different creativity level. Not necessarily fine dining, because I've done fine dining, and that's not really what we're doing here. It's
diner food.
It is diner food, and it needs to be approachable.
Yeah. Is it a little upscale diner food, would you say?
Sort of. I mean, compared to your average diner food, I guess. But more it's about, like, adding kind of little twists to things to make it more fun and interesting.
But I will note, the cakes are huge.
Yeah.
They look like infrastructure for a water department. I mean, like these big, 12-foot tubes for water to go through.
They weigh about anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds, depending on what
30-pound cake?
Yeah, they're massive. And honestly, they defy all the laws of cake making and building because there's no dowels, there's no plates. All of those things are normally what you would do to have layers that don't crush each other and that sort of thing. And we developed kind of a way to do it where you don't need all that stuff. So you can slice all the way down the 6 to 7 layers of cake without hitting a piece of plastic or any of that stuff like you would in a normal cake.
The restaurant business is so frickin' hard, and the margins are really small. Why do it?
That's a good question. You do it. Personally, I can only say why I do it. The reason I do it is I love people, and the act of feeding people is something that I personally find very rewarding. And whether I'm in the kitchen on the line cooking, and sometimes I am. If somebody calls out and I don't have enough staff, then I'm in there. Whether I'm bussing the table or whatever, that act of feeding people to me is the reason to do it.
You like engaging with people.
Absolutely. And food is like, it's a vehicle that we all understand. It's a way to always have a conversation starter.
And that's why I'm doing this podcast. That's why I'm doing this show, is a way to kind of connect people through an audio podcast, but in a diner over food where the walls can kind of come down, the guard is let down, and people just kind of reveal themselves. Yeah. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
What's the wildest thing you've seen in here so far in your 7 months of being open?
Oh, gosh. Every day there's something. Well, this is kind of tragic, but we've had a number of high school problems here, and not in the space, but in the parking lot. And that's been an interesting kind of aspect to all of this and the community.
When you say high school problems, what do you mean?
Well, the Alexandria city has one high school, and they're literally a block from here. And so these kids are coming from this very large high school where it's difficult to keep track of all the kids and stuff. And so they tend to sometimes congregate here in the parking lot. So we've definitely had issues, over the
Fights
past 7
and things
months.
like that.
Fights. Unfortunately, one fight broke out and one of the teenagers was killed. Actually,
Oh my God.
Yeah, this
That's
was a few months
heartbreaking.
ago. It was heartbreaking. I saw an immediate dip in business because, some of my customers weren't comfortable coming to the shopping center. And then people started showing up and everybody wanted to talk about it. And so it ended up being, for me anyway, it's like I heard so many different viewpoints. We have a friend who's a reporter locally who was in here every day just sort of talking to people about it. And although I don't consider myself political or, I'm not super engaged with politics or anything, as a business owner and a part of the community, I felt engaged with what had happened because it was, not only was it impacting me, but it was impacting the people that I'm serving in lots of ways. And
You felt the pain and astonishment of what happened in your parking lot. You felt the reverberation of the human pain as a community, and yet you were a place of solace where people could come and talk about it and kind of get it off their chest.
Right, absolutely. So and then eventually there was all sorts of things that were enacted, and I got to witness a lot of it and kind of go through the process of seeing what the results were and the outcomes, and every day, stuff can happen out here, and just like in everywhere in life, For me anyway, it was kind of a unique situation, obviously tragic and terrible, but also good to witness, just so I had a better understanding of,
You saw
like
people
this.
coming together as a community, shared in their grief, but finding a way to deal with it and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see how that's changed things, what the responses were and how that, how people's ideas are changing or their opinions have shifted or whatever.
And because of that, is business coming back?
Yeah, business has been, did kind of bounce back and over the summer, and then, but it is people still bring it up here. So obviously it's still a concern, but I'm glad people are talking about it because I would rather have them in here talking about it than not coming in and not talking about it,
Right. Who can't resolve an issue over pie?
Right?
Well, congratulations on opening the Beeliner and realizing your dream. Was it a dream to open a diner like this?
Oh, I can't say it was a dream. It was more an opportunity that
you
came
saw
up,
it.
and we decided to go for it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're now part of the Dinerverse.
Yeah, we are.
You're now part of the Dinerverse officially. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you.
When I was at the Beeliner Diner, it wasn't too crowded. It was kind of in between breakfast and lunch. And I was just kind of waiting around for a while for somebody to walk in that I thought would be a good candidate to be on the show. And finally, he walked through the door. African-American guy. Looks like he's very healthy and looks like he loves diner type of food. And he was wearing this white Panama hat with a black band around it. And he just had this face that looked like, yeah, he's a nice guy. I'll talk to anybody. And he sat down with me. And what is your name?
It's Albert.
Albert. How are you doing today?
I'm doing lovely.
Albert, one question.
Sure.
What's your story?
Well, I've lived a good life, southern boy.
Where in the South are you from?
I'm from a place called Timmonsville, South Carolina, which is probably better known as the home of Cale Yarborough, the famous race driver.
Okay, Cale Yarborough, in case you don't know, he was born William Caleb Cale Yarborough, and he was a NASCAR Winston Cup Series driver and an owner. He's a businessman and a farmer. And he was only one of 2 drivers in NASCAR history to win 3 consecutive NASCAR championships, winning in 1976, 77, and 78. And he's still around at 83. Did you ever meet Mr. Yarborough?
Oh, he loved my father. As a teenager, he'd come by our house. He'd eat there all the time. He loved my father.
Why?
My dad was just a great guy. Everybody knew him. He was a great hunter, fisherman, checker player,
Did you grow up in South Carolina during the Civil Rights era?
Yes, I did.
What was that like? Do you have any memories of it?
My best memories of it are that South Carolina was sort of isolated until an incident sort of triggered some things at South Carolina State College. But South Carolina was kind of unique in that there was a kind of a peaceful coexistence of some very, very ugly and nasty history and things like that. But there was sort of a peaceful coexistence, and changes were coming about a little slower than the rest of the world, but we seem to be fine with it.
So you're talking about race relationships specifically between white people and black people.
Sure, yes.
Obviously, South Carolina is the flashpoint of the Civil War with Fort Sumter in Charleston. That night when Fort Sumter was attacked, Charlestonians, is that what you call them?
Yes.
Charlestonians were actually on their roofs partying.
Yes.
As Fort Sumter was attacked by the Southern militia against the federal government. Quite a history.
Quite.
And you feel that growing up in the 60s in South Carolina, that some of that conflict had been kind of washed over or resolved, or how did people approach each other?
Well, there was still some constant kind of things, and the divisions were actually a little bit different. You had the dominant white society, but you also had lots and lots of other ethnicities that moved in. If you were Jewish, then you had as many restrictions as blacks. If you were Greek.
So any immigrant into South Carolina who wasn't a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant,
right,
were met with kind of resistance from the community.
We were just divided. It was divided, and it was understood. Golf courses, the restaurants, hotels.
Off limits to you?
Off limits, yes.
Do you remember going to a different line in a grocery store or like a diner like this Beeliner Diner, where you had to sit in a different section?
There was no sitting.
You had to stand in a different section.
No, you were served at the side or back window, and you had to get it on the go.
And how did you say your father was a really well-liked guy. How did he discuss that with you? What did he say to you and the family about this situation, about this relationship between whites and blacks during the Civil Rights era? How did he disseminate that information and those feelings to you?
Well, one of the things that it was in his actions, my father worked in the tobacco industry, but he was not a laborer. He was a professional because he understood things about tobaccos. He was always kind of respected. Many times in our families, we had lots of exchanges with whites, and sometimes even with their families, where we would go to their house and we wouldn't sit at the main table necessarily. And when they came to our house, very seldom they came inside, but there were a lot of exchanges. And my father hunted and fished with a lot of them. But in terms of restaurants, my father had a strict rule for us. We could not go and purchase food at a side window or a back door. If you can't go in the front, then they can't get your money.
And what's your memory of your family dynamic between your mother and your father and your siblings? Tight, close, or kind of separate and on your own?
Very, very, very tight, very, very close.
Loving?
Loving, a lot of love. We were, my mother she knew how to love people. She knew how to accept everyone and we had white relatives. One guy was involved two generations earlier, or something like that.
So there was a white bloodline in your family line.
We were never ever allowed to verbalize anything, or
like you weren't allowed to call a white person a cracker or something like that.
That was not necessarily derogatory in the South. Many of the politicians from Georgia introduced themselves
as crackers.
As crackers, and so because they knew how to take the sting out of it.
Did you hear the N-word a lot?
All the time.
How did that make you feel?
Well, 99% of the time, it wasn't used in a pejorative sort of way. It was just part of the culture.
Did you hear that from white people or black people?
Most of it was because it was so common in the black community. Yeah. I mean, it was the way to kind of sting a little bit. But then certain people are prohibited, no matter whether it's something that they were raised with also, and there was no intent there, just not allowed to say it. And so I think it's very hypocritical. But I think we've developed a kind of a shell that promotes it.
What's your career? What do you do? What have you done?
Presently, I'm a consultant for the gas company. I retired as a minister, I worked for a worldwide organization called Prison Fellowship Ministries, started by a guy by the name of Charles Colson.
Charles Colson, yes, one of the Watergate infamous Mr. Colson.
So I worked 23 years with that.
Now, Charles, or Chuck Colson, good old Chuck, former White House counsel to President Nixon between 1969 and 1970, he specialized in political affairs for the White House, whatever that means, maybe fundraising, I guess. And good old Chuck pled nolo contendere. It's a fancy schmancy Latin term, which means he neither admitted nor denied a charge of obstruction of justice on June 3, 1974, having persuaded the prosecution to change the charge from one of which he believed himself innocent to another of which he believed himself guilty. And he did that in order to testify freely during the Watergate hearings. So Colson was sentenced to 1 to 3 years of prison and fined $5,000. He only served 7 months.
Restorative justice was always his, sort of one of his terms. How do you restore an individual? How do you bring him back into the community so that he's a respected taxpayer? Eventually, you know, the very thought of what he did or the very thought of what he served time for disappeared.
So you have a prominent, well-connected, wealthy white guy going to prison for the first time in his life, and then he sees what's inside a prison.
Yes.
And it changes his heart, and he understands that nobody's beyond redemption. No matter what you've done, you do the time, you can come back from that. And you as a man of God, a minister, and what denomination were you a minister in?
I'm a Baptist pastor.
A Baptist pastor. I would say that you would believe that, right? Anybody is redeemable.
Absolutely.
If they want to be.
Absolutely.
And you worked with Charles Colson to do that. Wow.
23 years.
Did he ever share what his worst experience in prison was, this Mr. Charles Colson?
Oh, we visited many prisons together. My career before Prison Fellowship was I was in law enforcement. I put men and women in prison.
Wow.
Bombshell, I went to prison myself.
You did?
I did.
For what?
It was called a conspiracy. I was in drug enforcement, and I knew of something that happened, and I condoned it, and I even helped give an excuse for my friends, my co-workers who did it. After I gave them a cover, they pled guilty and
turned around and ratted you out.
And ratted me out, yes.
And you admit it, you did it.
Oh, I did it, yes. I sure did.
How long were you in prison?
Maybe 17, 18 months.
All right, so I'm trying to figure out the timeline here. So you were a cop, you did a conspiracy, you tried to cover up, people ratted you out, but you had transferred into ministry, and then they came back around and, nabbed you.
Yes.
I'm sure that was scandalous. A man of the cloth, a minister, finally being arrested.
No, because the people around me knew my past.
So you told them?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Couldn't help it. It was in the papers. It was everywhere. It was kind of big.
What's been your greatest joy being a minister and your biggest disappointment being a minister?
My biggest disappointment was sometimes looking at my own heart.
That's honest.
Yeah.
Because we're all sinners, aren't we?
Yes, right.
We all have a dark side. Yeah. We all have that capability of being pushed over the edge to do something that we would really regret.
And when you look at the number of things that you thought of and didn't do, when you start bean counting there, you are in trouble. But one of the things I probably enjoyed the most, a man came into my office one day and he told me, I know you've had the prison experience, and I know, and you are authority in the church. He said, I have a problem. So what's that? He said, I killed somebody 20 years ago, and nobody knows anything about it.
Oh, my God.
And I want to turn myself in.
Oh, my God.
That was another one of those boom newspaper media kind of things that happened as it went in.
Sure.
He wanted to turn himself in. He was here in D.C. metro area. He'd killed someone back in Kansas 20 years earlier. Prayed with his mother. His mother told him, asked for forgiveness from God, and his mother told him, go and live your life. And he came and he lived his life. He had family. He was in church. He was a leader in the Boy Scout activities in his church.
So he did all these things, had this image. People knew him as a great man, great leader, great father, but he had this secret that was eating away at his soul. And he finally came to you, and what did he say?
He said, I need you to help me understand this, and I need you. He said, I know I'm going to go to prison. I need you to help me to understand how to take what God has put in my heart and take it into the prisons and make a difference. We talked, made sure his family was all in agreement with it, and we got in touch with the Kansas authorities, flew with him met with the prosecutor. We sat down in a diner just like this up till about 4 o'clock in the morning. And they took him in the next morning, and he pled guilty.
And there's no statute of limitations when it comes to murder.
None.
They would chase him forever.
Yeah.
And it was chasing him inside forever.
That was what caught him.
And where is he still in prison now?
I think he's eligible for parole now. His name was Daniel Crocker.
Did Mr. Crocker explain to you exactly the nature of the crime and what led to the murder? What happened?
He said he was running around with the crowd. They were using drugs, and they went to a young lady's house, and they got high. She said she wanted to clean up, rest up before her boyfriend came home, but he took it as that she was trying to get rid of everybody else so she could be with him. So he left the sliding glass door open. After everybody left, he went back. She was asleep. He tried to awake her as if he thought he was comforting her. He was what she wanted, and she started to scream, and he put a pillow over her head, ended up
suffocating
her.
Oh, my God.
And eased out the sliding door and left. Went home, cried to his mother, told his mother what he'd done. They were kind of accusing either the boyfriend or the father. That really tore that family apart. So 20 years later, even though when he came to turn himself in, there was still a great deal of hostility and anger towards him, yeah.
Do you feel most people have good hearts want to try to do good?
There's a real bad identification between intent and what people do. My Bible says that the heart is evil and deceitful.
That's Jeremiah.
Yeah.
The heart is deceitful beyond measure. Who can know it?
Yeah, who can know it?
What do you think is more important when it comes to God? Religion or a relationship?
Absolutely relationship.
Because religion is a man construct and can be manipulated.
Absolutely.
I find when man tries to intervene with God, man screws it up most of the time.
Probably closer to all of the time. To meld politics and religion.
Mistake.
Big, big mistake.
And we're experiencing that right now.
Right now, sure. Racial relationships, slavery, those kinds of things. All of those things. The church was right there.
I will say, I'll just say this myself. Some of the angriest, unkind, misled people I've ever met have been in church.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
We settle for our opinion versus the truth.
I don't think one guy standing on a street corner on a soapbox with a big sign that says, repent, and start shaming people for their sins as they walk to a football game is going to convert one heart to Jesus. However, somebody who does their best on a daily basis to live their life like Christ and walk the walk like Christ, but don't promote it, just live it, people see that. People see how they handle a crisis. People see how they deal with other people. And they ask them, you kind of handle life, the ups and downs of life pretty well. How do you do that? And that gives you the opportunity to share your faith, whatever that is.
If I could have known some things that I've known only a couple of years, could have made such a difference. If I had been able to dispel the negative kinds of things and how to really open up to people who I didn't understand, what a difference it would have made, not in their lives, but a difference it would have made in my life. And I've got a lot of years to go. I guess it's going to go on until time for me to take my leave. As long as you stay open and willing to not change the world, but change yourself.
So what do you think is the solution for us to reconcile racially?
I don't think it's in our future. I don't think it can happen. Because even those who desire to or pretend to be guided by the light, they don't love one another. You start with my institution, with the church. You can start inside my church. We're never going to have a great come-by-our moment where we all go over the hill loving and hugging one another.
Albert went on to say that we at least have to talk to one another with respect if we're going to improve the dialogue to tackle the tough, complex issues facing our country. On a lighter note, our conversation turned to chicken. That's right, chicken, the fried kind.
I do a pretty good job at it, I've been told. I tell people, my wife told me that if the colonel had my recipe, he would have been a general.
I love it. Your fried chicken's that good.
That's
huh?
it. That's for sure.
Okay, what's your secret sauce?
Can't tell you that.
Come on.
No,
come on.
No, can't tell you this.
Give me one ingredient that's secret.
Celery seed. It's the greatest thing that ever happened to fried chicken or potato salad. And then choosing how you're going to have your fried chicken, whether you like it crispy or but then you got to use different things because you don't want to use ingredients that burn away.
Are you trying to say fried chicken is a science
Absolutely.
and should be taught in school?
Absolutely.
Fried chicken 101. Would you like some breakfast?
I could handle a little. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
All right. You want to try their fried chicken? They say, nah.
That'd be for another time, but
Excellent.
Yeah.
Albert, it's so wonderful meeting you and talking with you. Thank you for being on the Across the Dinerverse podcast.
And thank you. I've enjoyed it.
All right, so turning back to the Beeliner Diner for a second, if you remember when I was talking to Noelie at the top of the show, she mentioned the artist who was responsible for this magnificent gallery artwork hanging inside a diner, which is really not typical of a diner at all. And the artist who created these paintings is her partner in the Beeliner Diner, and his name is Marcos. Tell me about your art career.
Let's see. It all started in kindergarten. Actually, I had a teacher who let me post paper to the wall. I had just gone to the East Gallery in Washington, D.C. and been inspired by Jackson Pollock. He literally blew my mind.
The great modern impressionistic painter who did splatters.
Yeah.
He created the splatter look.
I found so much freedom in that. So even at that age, I identified with it. And
What is it about that style of painting that you identify with emotionally as an artist?
Oh God, there's so much energy to it. It's wild. It's let loose. It's passionate. There's energy. There's physical energy. And then you have tangible manifestations on that surface. And it's open to interpretation.
Some people could see rage. Some people could see joy. Some people could see an orgasm.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
Did you do any formal training in this art?
Yes. I studied through high school. I went to San Francisco Art Institute for my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn for my Master's of Fine Arts. My focus was certainly in painting, generally very large paintings. I work a lot with fire and the elements, so I was a bit of a pyro when I was a little kid.
Oh, wait a minute. Don't just like throw that away. I work with pyro. And did you burn stuff when you were a kid?
I did.
Did you burn anything down?
Thank God nothing got out of hand. There was one moment when I probably should have died.
What?
Yeah, a giant tractor gasoline barrel was filled with gasoline, and I had dumped a lot of gasoline out on a canvas, and I didn't realize that the can was sort of dripping when I brought it to another place that I thought was safe, and I lit my canvas on fire to kind of capture that smoke and burn through some of the paints and plastic that were on it. And suddenly I watched the fire like out of a movie ignite and shoot across my scope of vision to the giant gasoline container, literally about 1.5 feet from me. And as it lit and the spout lit, I just turned my body and braced and thought it was going to explode. And somehow it didn't explode, and it was on fire. I was able to put it out and walk away and live to paint another day.
But what is the thrill you get from fire?
Controlled chaos. In a sense, it's something that is absolutely magical. It's got its own life form, which I can sense or see, or I'm really blown away by. I can sort of guide it, but it's got its own energy. It does its own thing. It leaves its own impressions. Capturing these elements is super, super rewarding for myself.
So would you consider yourself a successful artist?
You know,
Did you make a living as an artist?
Yes and no. I certainly sold a lot of paintings.
Thousands of dollars?
Yeah, thousands and
Tens of thousands?
And the pieces were maybe around up to about 10 grand.
So why leave the art world and get into the restaurant business?
It was a decision. I had a girlfriend at the time who wanted to leave New York.
It's always
school.
the girl, isn't
Yeah,
it? It's
man.
always the girl. That's the challenge.
Yeah. She gave me that option. She said, I've got to go. And if you're willing to leave, I'll go wherever you want to go. And at that time, my father's health was failing quite a bit, and our family business was in turn as well. And that was here in the Washington, D.C. area. I said, well, you know my situation, you know my family dynamic in Northern Virginia. Would you be willing to go down there and we'll help there? So she said yes. And right then and there, I made my decision.
So you're not walking away from your art?
No, I'm embodying it in different forms and fashions.
Did you help design this restaurant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it looks great.
Thank you.
The most important question.
Yeah.
Is the girl who started this whole thing still in the picture?
No.
Of course not.
No. Yeah,
of course not.
No.
You know, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
That, you know, you're in a relationship. The girl says, I hate it here. I got to go. You're coming with me or you're not. And you think about it. You got your whole art world life. It's successful. Thousands, $10,000 a painting. You're going, you know what? I'm going to follow the girl. Now, there's a reason I can follow the girl because I love her, but also it can help my family situation. She wants to get out of New York. Bang, we're golden. You make this huge career pivot, and she's gone.
Yeah, so listen.
But she was the catalyst.
Absolutely. I had, because I was down here, even as it ended, it left me with a lot of means and ability to focus on something. And the very first person that came to work with me was Noelie Ricky, and my partner now in life and in business. And there she was. And
so you and Noelie are in a personal relationship?
we are, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I didn't make that connection.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, great.
Yeah, man.
Talk about the fear.
Zero fear.
Zero fear.
None at all.
You knew this is the direction. It felt right. It felt organically correct.
I didn't know what I was doing or going to be doing, but it felt that I was pursuing something meaningful, and I was still me. So I carry that art within me, no matter what I do, where I go, right?
Well, Noelie said that her greatest joy is feeding people and watching them enjoy the food and eating.
That's amazing. It is so amazing. It's the best thing ever.
You feel that too?
I do, yeah. You're making me realize this with painting. When I saw my paintings up on somebody's wall, a customer's wall, they put it up here or there, or God knows where, and I came and saw it living on somebody else's wall in appreciation.
Living is a great word,
Oh,
great
my
verb
God.
for that. Your painting
that
is living
was-
on somebody else's wall. I love that.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the Dinerverse.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's all my pleasure. I'm really glad to have met you.
So as soon as I got done talking to Marcos, I saw the cook come out of the kitchen. And I thought, well, he looks like a cool young guy and might be kind of cool to talk to the cook at the Beeliner Diner. I couldn't have been more wrong. And this is not the first time. This is not the first time I've been wrong, nor will it be the last. But here he is, the guy who is not the cook. What's your first name?
Patrick.
Patrick, what's your story?
Well, I'm a chef of 20 years. Started real young when I was 19, got my first gig, and haven't really turned back since. I've kind of done everything. QSR concepts, fine dining, casual dining.
Now, a lot of people throw the term chef around.
Right.
What does it take to become a chef? I mean, do you have to pass a test, a culinary test of some kind, or can you just call yourself can you work at a burger joint and call yourself a chef?
No, it's kind of like knighting, you know. There has to be another chef, and you have to put the knife on your shoulder and say you're a chef.
Really, that happens?
No, I'm joking.
I don't know.
No, really a lot of the term in the last 10 years has become like really loosely used and kind of lost its appeal. Really what a chef means is you're able to be creative in the kitchen, right? You can create dishes and execute. There's the management piece of it, being able to mentor and create cooks and build them up.
And also be a general to hold your staff accountable to being on time and
Absolutely.
delivering the food.
Yeah, the operations piece of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of all those things. And, I find that these days, a lot of chefs have bits and pieces of that and not a whole lot of it. And that's because of the way the food market is now. You've got quick service and you've got casual restaurants, you've got, food trucks, and, the chef moniker
Watered down?
has been watered down, I guess you could say, yeah. So
you're saying there's a lot of bullshit chefs out there?
For sure. Like, it doesn't carry the same kind of prestige that it used to.
Do you feel like you are a true culinary chef?
Oh, absolutely.
You've gone to a culinary school.
I've gone to a culinary school. I've opened up my own places. I consult for a bunch of different people. I'm as much of a chef as you're gonna get these days, especially. Yeah.
And what's your background? What's your story? What's your history? Where did you come from?
Well, I'm from the Philippines. Migrated here when I was 2. Always had a passion for food ever since I was young. I was a latchkey kid, so I grew up watching Martin Yan and Julia Child, and that was kind of like my inspiration. Then after that, like most kids do, got into a lot of trouble when I was younger, and then I found food, and it kind of saved me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I started working in a restaurant, and one day the chef walked out, and at the same time I was still going to culinary school. Chef walked out, and the GM was, like sweating bullets because he didn't have a chef anymore. And jokingly I said to him, "Hey man, you just give me the keys and let me run this place, right?" And
how old were you?
I was 19.
You were 19.
I was 19 years old.
That's
and,
ballsy.
I was halfway joking, right? And he opened up my hand and he took the keys, put the keys in my hand. He said, "You're closing tonight. Don't fuck it up."
He really?
Yeah.
You gave me the keys.
He gave me the keys, and I saw that as my shot. That was it, right? Like I can do this. And I dropped the ball along the way, made some mistakes, but I came out on top at the end of it. And
Did this guy that gave you the keys, did he let you stay in the job, or did he end up firing you?
No, I actually stayed with that company for a good 6 years.
That's great.
And I used that as my skipping stone to launch myself to other things. And then after that, I did some fine dining stuff, worked with a lot of celebrity chefs.
Name one.
Katsuji Tanabe, he was on Top Chef. He was a season 4, 5, and 6 finalist. I opened up a restaurant with him.
Wow.
I worked with Antoine Westerman, 3-star Michelin chef, actually famous for giving his stars back.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did.
Why did he give his stars back to Michelin?
I guess he was just done with it. He's just like, to hell with this. I want to do my own thing my way,
That's very interesting. Now, the Michelin star system, is that a very political kind of thing?
I don't think it is, but I like the chef title. I think that doesn't carry the same kind of prestige that it used to, and that I would like to attribute that to the whole Food Network kind of explosion over the last decade or so. Everybody wants to be a chef. It's glamorous now, and I started back then when it wasn't glamorous to be a chef.
It's hard work.
It's hard work.
Thankless work sometimes.
Thankless work. The money wasn't that great, and it's time consuming. It eats up all your time. You never get to see family.
Eats up all your time.
Right,
I love that.
So that's kind of what it is, and I was always the black sheep in the family growing up because of it, right? I was being of Asian descent. It was always like doctor, lawyer, right?
Right.
Chef? No.
Nothing artistic.
Right.
Nothing artistic.
Yeah, how are you going to pay bills that way, And then when I actually started to find success and start getting in publications and, just start getting my name out there and start taking some bigger gigs, then I started to gain a little bit more respect from the family and friends because it was cool to be a chef now, right? So it's kind of funny how that works. Yeah.
What's your signature dish that you've created?
I don't really have a signature dish. I actually pride myself on being like a jack of all trades.
Some say jack of all trades, master of none.
I'm master of all, man. I started off classically French trained, and then I spent a good stint of my career doing Italian. And then after that, I just grew up cooking Asian food. I opened up this restaurant with Katsuji Tanabe, and at this point in my career, I had all the tools, but I didn't realize how to piece it together in a way that made sense. And
financial sense or creative sense?
Creative sense. So I have all these different cultures and different food fundamentals in my brain, and I just didn't know how to get all of it on a plate that made sense.
French, Italian, Asian fusion. How do you fuse those together?
Right. And then I worked with Katsuji, and he's half Japanese, half Mexican. And his food was indicative of that. It's exactly what you would probably think.
He found the perfect combination to put them together.
Yeah, and, I didn't spend a whole lot of time with him. We didn't exactly exemplify the typical teacher-student dynamic. It was mostly
Do what I say.
Yeah, kind of that. And I was left to my own devices a lot of the time too. But seeing how he did that and just seeing what was possible, it opened up my eyes to a lot of different things. So now I kind of like to blend Asian and Latin flavors using French and Italian techniques. And I go off the wall with the stuff. I'll show you my Instagram after we get off the mic, and I'll
Go
show
ahead
you.
and tell us what your Instagram is on the show.
The Hangry Chef, DAHANGRY CHEF, The Hangry Chef.
The Hangry.
Yep.
It kind of sounds like a slang, like the
Yeah,
Angry Chef.
Yeah. I mean,
The Angry Chef. I'm really pissed off.
Right.
I can't get the spices I need.
That's how it is sometimes, man. That's how it goes. It's been a journey. So, I started off doing the fine dining stuff, and now we're doing like the diner, and I'm used to being the guy on the expo pass with my tweezers and playing with edible flowers and stuff. And now I'm flipping burgers, and I'm at the Caps Arena, like it's wild. It's wild. It's definitely.
Are you still passionate about cooking?
Stars and James Beard's awards? I mean, those are still very much, on my bucket list to do. So,
Do you think that's
possible?
possible to achieve being an immigrant? I know you're a naturalized American citizen, right?
Yep.
Yeah, right. So is that possible in America today?
I think so. You have a lot of great, talented chefs from all different walks of life these days that are making it big.
You feel like you have equal access to the opportunities.
I think I do. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the kitchen, because it's one of the last few places where your talent and your hard work can literally speak volumes.
Despite where you're from or your background or nationality or whatever.
Usually when I walk into a kitchen and I bust out the knives and I start throwing down, usually I garner the respect of most people that I need to.
Because knives can kill.
Knives can kill. It can definitely chop an onion too.
Patrick, I wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you
It's been
very
a
much, my
pleasure
friend. It's been a
talking to you, and welcome to the Dinerverse.
Thank you very much. We're gonna kill it. I'm looking forward to it, man.
Well, there you go. Another fabulous episode of Across the Dinerverse. I'd like to thank everybody at the Beeliner Diner in Alexandria, Virginia for hosting us. That's the Beeliner Diner. Thanks to Noelie and Marcos, the owners. Beeliner.com. That's Beeliner.com. Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. What's your story?